All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Beneath the Surface, PAW's new blog and podcast that is designed to uncover the stories, policies, and people driving Wyoming's energy future from exploration to regulation. I'm here with PAW President Pete Obermueller and PAW Board Chair Shelley Shelby. Pete has been with PAW since 2019. Prior to that, he was with the Wyoming County Commissioners Association and spent some time in DC working for Wyoming's members of the House of Representatives. And Shelley Shelby is with Continental Resources. So welcome to you both. Thank you for doing this. And to start off with, I just want to do a quick icebreaker and ask, really before we dive in, what is your favorite part about working in Wyoming's energy industry? And Shelley, I think I'll start with you.
Okay. Before we get started, I will say this. We need some cool podcast music because Beneath the Surface, like dun dun or something like that. It sounds like a very dramatic murder mystery podcast series or something. But
you should have heard, Shelley, you should have heard some of the other name possibilities that we kicked around, like Oil Be Honest, or Slick Talk was one of them, which my colleague Jeremiah with County Commissioners does a daily video update for his members during the legislative session. I don't know how he has time for that, but I thought, like, if I started doing a daily video thing during the session, I would definitely call it Slick Talk for like the triple entendre. Anyway, sorry, go ahead, Shelley.
It was my distraction, I promise. But what do I love about Wyoming, working in Wyoming's energy industry? There's a lot that I really love about Wyoming. It is definitely one of my favorite states. I'm sure some folks in other states would not like to hear that, but it is true. Part of it is the people. The people are very much engaged and interested in oil and gas. You have an politically engaged, citizenry in the first place. They're very knowledgeable about everything going on in the state, and they care. And they care about the extractive industries and are supportive of them, which is pretty unique. And I think a lot of it has to do with just the general ethos of the state and the people in the state in the first place, but and their recognition that the extractive industries and oil and gas and mining and other things are really important to the core spirit of Wyoming. And it's just, as someone who operates in multiple states, it's refreshing to see, refreshing to deal with politically, and definitely something that I enjoy.
Yeah, ditto all that. I think from an association standpoint, it's pretty. I don't know how. I guess it's not super unique in kind of states that have not as big oil and gas production. Wyoming's kind of middle of the pack in terms of total volume, but still, lots of my colleagues in other states. I don't know if this is true in Oklahoma. You have to tell me. But there's not just one oil and gas trade association. There's multiple ones because for whatever reason in history I don't know about, it didn't seem like one faction or the other didn't feel like they were represented by the association. So in terms of just the association work, I love that it's just a petroleum association in Wyoming, and we represent the bigs like Exxon and Continental and Occidental and all that, all the way down to the really small guys operating one or two wells even. And what I love about that the most is that they actually look out for each other. They don't always agree, but the small guys tend to generally understand that the whole ecosystem is more successful if the bigger guys are successful. And so they're willing to kind of push an agenda that maybe doesn't affect them as much, and vice versa. And I just in my 6 years, I've seen that that's not quite true in other places. I don't know about Oklahoma. I'm not sure about whether there's two or more in Oklahoma or not, but I know a lot of other states have more than one and sometimes more than two associations, and I don't know how they coordinate all that stuff, to be honest.
It's very difficult for sure. Oklahoma is pretty divided in terms of the two trade groups that represent the different sizes and so forth. So it is very much an emotional fight a lot of times, and I'm very glad we don't have it Wyoming. But I just want to clarify one thing. We are still Little Oil. We are still very much a boots and jeans company from Enid, Oklahoma. Even though we are big,
Touche.
we still think of ourselves as Little Oil. So.
Yeah, I'm on a Wyoming sliding scale here. Like,
yeah,
what I mean?
It's something that I kind of appreciate about Continental in particular is that we have never lost our spunk and our independence, and have never gotten so big that we lose that kind of edge or that fight for producing as much as possible. So
yeah,
I appreciate it about us. So I have to throw out our Little Oil.
Love it. Fair enough. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, Pete, something you brought up that made me think about last year was PAW's 50th anniversary, and that came from the combining of two different oil and gas industry groups.
Right.
And so I would say I appreciate that as well. I think working here, I think for me it's just the fact that the general populace in Wyoming understands the importance of the industry to the state, and I think that's helpful to me. I think it's helpful to the industry, but that can always change. But I think deep down the people here know the importance of the industry and what it means, not just to the companies but also to their friends and neighbors. So that's one of the things I appreciate. Kind of along those, Pete, let's kind of dive into why we're doing this. If you kind of want to give an idea of why we're starting Beneath the Surface and what we're doing going forward.
Yeah, well, let's give credit where credit's due. It's mostly your idea, Ryan. Maybe not these videos. I might have imposed here on this. So if this part is terrible, it's my fault. The rest of it will be good. It'll be Ryan's. But really, it's kind of been an iteration since I started, and since Ryan started. We were always trying to figure out. I think this is true in trade associations across the board, but trying to figure out how we can get information out to people in a way that's digestible and maybe a little bit of fun, and just provide some value to our members. It's kind of the question we ask every day, really, is what are we doing that's providing value to our members? If it's not providing any value, then why are we doing it? And so when I started, we were doing PAW was doing a paper newsletter, which, by the way, speaking of Beneath the Surface, so some of you have asked me over time, like, why I always say PAW instead of PAW. And the honest answer to that is that when I started in 2019, my kids were young enough where Paw Patrol was still kind of part of their lexicon. And so they thought it was amazing that I was working for Paw Patrol. And then our newsletter was called Paw Prints. And the whole thing just did not work. It just didn't work for me. So we had to scuttle Paw Prints, and I just refused to call it Paw. And that's why I always call it PAW. So that the little beneath the surface there for you there. Anyway, so we got rid of the paper newsletter, went to digital, and we've been doing that for a while, and just kind of tracking our numbers on our newsletter that we had been doing every other month, just kind of more like announcements and some news stories, different than your clips that you do, Ryan, every day. And it just didn't seem like it was quite meeting the need. And so the idea was that you had brought to me, and then we kicked around other ways to do it, is what if we went to this once a month, had a once a month either blog, written blog, had to have guest writers, staff writers, really, experts, anybody who wanted to be a part of it. There's so many of us have a story to tell. All of us have a story to tell in this industry. And I think that we can kind of get out the basic announcements, but also have more of a conversation like this, whether it's written or video. I don't think we'll do these kind of podcast type videos every time, but I do think we'll try to do sometimes. And we'll try to do some in-depth storytelling. We'll try to use it to educate the public as well when that's appropriate, but also just kind of have an internal discussion with our members. And I think I'd actually turn it back on you a little bit. I think part of why you were thinking about doing this is the media landscape in Wyoming is really a challenge. Can you say a word or two about what our struggles are in Wyoming on media? It's a little bit different than I think than larger markets.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there with the fact that we just have somewhat of a challenging media landscape. We've got some great outlets in the state that get stories out there, but there's two problems. One, we're a small state and don't have a diverse set of media outlets. And when I say that, a lot of our smaller newspapers rely on stories from the bigger outlets, and therefore get a single perspective across the state, which can be challenging. And then just also the loss of energy and natural resource reporters at some of our outlets in the state. And so for us to be able to get our story out there, and it's not just us, I think this is an issue across the board with associations and industries, but making sure that we can tell our story means that we're going to have to tell it ourselves and utilize the resources that we have, the power of the internet and social media. And so that's why I kind of wanted to put something forward that is really owned by PAW and allows us to tell our story the way we want it told. Shelley, any thoughts there on that?
No, I mean, not specifically. I think you guys have kind of covered it. I would maybe add a little bit, which is I think sometimes we also forget to tell the beginning of a story. A lot of times when you're in a trade association world or you're in an advocacy role like government affairs at a company, you start talking about some legislation or a constitutional change or an issue that we have going on in Wyoming. Let's say these APDs tied up in the BLM issue in Commerce County, for example. And like you start the story at steps 6 and you forget to talk about 1 through 5 for your average person. And so you just kind of assume that everybody knows, for example, there's been an issue with the previous administration kind of stopping activity with the BLM, right? And now we're trying to fix that with the current administration. But you sometimes have to go back and tell 1 through 5 in order to then start the story where you are now advocacy wise. And I think venues or outlets like this are good ways to do those kinds of things. I also think that it personalizes oil and gas advocacy in a lot of ways. When you talk about oil and gas, a lot of times people do think about the big companies or issues like or think about Houston or Venezuela or, Russia and Nord Stream 2 and all these things. They don't necessarily think about Douglas, Wyoming, Casper, how much it's impacted by it, how much the entire state of Wyoming is impacted by it. And when you personalize it and you put a person who is involved in all of those things out there visually in front of people, I think it helps. Thirdly, I will say this. Our own internal companies sometimes suffer from this too a little bit, where you get entire, depending on how big you are, certain companies are huge, obviously. There's, groups of accountants or groups of tax people or computer IT people who are doing IT work or doing tax work or doing accounting work on an everyday basis. But that connection to oil and gas advocacy and their role in it, because they are working for an oil and gas company, is sometimes something that we all struggle with, is like connecting them to, hey, you are actually working for an oil and gas company and this policy here affects you. Like the bill we did last session on the narrowing the gap on the 45Q EOR CCUS issue, for example, like your average IT guy isn't going to know how that could affect his company or her company or the state of Wyoming. And so you can kind of personalize those stories and tell them a little bit and kind of make some of those connections and turn all employees into advocates as much as possible within the companies themselves. So within the industry.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I don't think people think too often about that you're not everybody's out, on the rig. And not everybody is like pounding the halls of whichever state capital to try to push laws and regulations that are favorable to oil and gas. They happen to work for an oil and gas company, but are an IT specialist. What does that mean for them? If certain policies move forward or not.
Right. I want them to feel that connection. I want them to feel that direct connection of, if the BLM stops issuing permits and stops activity in Wyoming, then our activity is constricted. And I want them to know that hurts them as well, and kind of feel that connection and become advocates for it all. So there's broader folks than just those designated advocates or designated mouthpieces, arguing for the issues. So.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, so I think that was really kind of embedded in our goals here is the reaching out beyond just our membership and talking to the public, talking to the members of our companies who are not actively involved in the day-to-day operation side of oil and gas development. And so with that, I think we're really trying to tailor the guests and the topics that we have to a wider audience. Pete, you and I have talked a lot about what we want to see from Beneath the Surface. Can you give a little bit of an idea of the things we've talked about and what we want to see moving forward as far as types of speakers or types of information that we want to put out there?
Yeah, I think it really the sky's the limit. There's especially in a place like Wyoming, Shelley alluded to this in terms of all the people that are impacted. But I've told this story a lot about the candy, the chocolate, the chocolatier in Casper who said, I sell chocolate, but I'm also in the oil and gas industry. That there are a lot of stories we can tell. So there'll be some stuff that I think is that you would expect. I think we'll hear from our federal policymakers, some state regulators and policymakers and all that kind of stuff that's typical for government affairs. But we'll branch out from there too. I think we'll have conversations like this with some people in various companies of all sizes, talking about their experience or their communities or that sort of thing. I'm hopeful that we can branch out and not necessarily just talk about strict oil and gas boring stuff too. Sometimes I want to get a little group together and talk about the TV show Landman. So catch up everybody if you haven't watched it. I want to. I could just spoiler alert. I haven't finished it because I thought the show was boring, but a lot of people tell me that it's not boring. So I'm gonna look at it with new eyes, and hopefully we can come back and talk about that. But you know what, Ryan? I wouldn't mind hearing from everybody who watches this. Who would you like to hear from? Who would you like to be on it? You know what I mean? Do you want to talk about something going on in your community or your company or anything like that? That's what I want to hear about is if we do something like this once a month, whether it's video or written or whatever, what is it that would make this worth your time to check it out, whether it's you're reading it or you're watching it. That's what I'm interested in.
Great. I think along those lines, Shelley, as well. What do you see as a representative of a member company? How is this going to be beneficial to PAW members, and what is your hope for this as a member of the board, chair of the PAW board?
Well, I think we can definitely tackle some of the complicated issues and break them down a little bit easier, make them more personable or understanding for folks who aren't, engaged in this every single day. And I think that will be helpful. I definitely think it will help us on the advocacy front if we're trying to do something, maybe a long-term project, maybe a short-term project, and just kind of explaining why it matters to our folks and our constituency basis. I also think we have some very interesting characters in Wyoming oil and gas. So I'm kind of looking forward to some stories being told.
Present company included, I think.
I don't know about that, but some stories from the days of that have gone on, and then maybe even some current stories. I think there would be some really fun opportunities for that could really help personalize a lot of our folks. I like the Landman idea, for example. I have not watched it, mostly because I am spoiled by Netflix and I need to watch a whole season. I cannot wait till things come out one at a time. So I've got it on my list to start at some point, but I'm completely, my behavior has changed when it comes to shows because it's that one company. But I think there's some great characterful landmen in Wyoming that would be fun to have on there and actually sit down and talk about what they do and or if their behavior is at all like Billy Bob Thornton's, which I hope it isn't, but it'd be fun to talk about.
I've yet to find a Wyoming landman who's, had a burlap sack over his head while negotiating a royalty deal, but maybe we'll find that out. I don't know.
I've heard some stories about some landowner negotiations as surface landowner teams. There could be some similar stories out there for sure.
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah. I think with that, we're kind of coming towards the end of our time. I know that we try to keep these short and keep people's interest. Pete, any final thoughts? Want to talk about where people can find Beneath the Surface moving forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it'll be, I think we're going to house it on our website. I think that's the plan. We're in the process of looking to do a little updates on our website anyway, and a little facelift on that, add some new features there too. And one of them will be this. pawyo.org is our website, and this will be housed there. And I think the goal, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, is to try to kick something out at least once a month, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And really be held and hosted on our website, also be shared on our social media. So be on the lookout for that. And as Pete said, feel free to share with us any thoughts that you have, anything that you'd like to hear more about from the oil and gas industry in Wyoming. We'd love to dive into some topics. Shelly, any final thoughts from you?
I'm looking forward to these ideas and submissions from some of those people I was referencing, the characterful people. But I definitely think that this will be a fun project, but very much will be just an increasing part of our advocacy and just very transparently being out there. If we are PAW, we are Wyoming Oil and Gas, and hate us or like us, whatever, but here's who we are and here's what we think on things. So
Love it.
Pete, anything else from you?
Nope. Thanks, Ryan, for doing this. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And as we said, be sure to be on the lookout for more stories from Beneath the Surface here at PAW.